program. Advice and opinions expressed during the program are solely that of Randolph School District, not WPEV or Good Karma Brands.
And welcome into Taking Care of Business today. Rocket Blast with Randolph School District. I have here with me today, of course, Brian Zacco. You can't miss Brian. He's been on the show several times, only once on video before this, so tune in if you want to see what he looks like. Might as well. But otherwise, we're very, very honored to have Brittany Cashman here with us as well on the show, going over a lot of different stuff. We haven't really talked to you guys since before the holidays.
Correct. Yeah, we haven't been back for a while, but we're glad to be here again and excited to talk about Randolph.
We'll start by getting all the pleasantries out of the way. Everybody's holiday was good. Everybody had a good time. Get everything you wanted for Christmas.
Yeah, it was great. I went down, sat on the beach in Florida. It was great. Yeah.
We'll talk about how jealous I am later. Yeah. Nothing wrong with that. Let's go ahead and start off with a little bit of, because we got a great note set here. Let's talk about what's going on in Rocket News. What's happening in Randolph?
Just some exciting stuff as we're getting, we had started a strategic plan last year, and so we are getting to the end of that. So we're going to be bringing that back to the community here in the next month or so, hopefully, and finishing that up is exciting. We just got back, like many school districts, from the state convention down in Milwaukee. Excited to have one of our staff members, Jessica Doherty, and then Mrs. Cashman there to help present on Educating Rising. So had some presenters there at the convention this year. That's exciting for us. So then we took three board members and myself down there to the sessions, and so got back Friday, was really good. And then also just finished at the last board meeting, we had our Johnson and Block audit come back, and so financials are all back and updated. And so just some kind of tools that just we need to have finished and updated for the year. And so now we're pushing forward. At the last board meeting, we talked about going for our first operational referendum is what really brings us here today. So,
and we'll be touching on that a little bit more here later in the show. I should take a moment because I want to make sure I don't forget to do this, but take a moment and introduce yourself again to anybody who doesn't know who you are and your relationship with the school district.
Sure. Brian Zacco, District Administrator. This is my third year at Randolph. Spent some time at Fall River prior to this. I have about 22 years in education. This is my first stop as a district administrator, and this is about the sixth show I think we've done here with WBEV.
That sounds about right. Yeah, I think it is about 6 shows now that we've done. And we've gone over a lot of stuff, and I know before we'd start the show off with some fun questions, get everybody get to know you. We'll skip those today because we haven't brought anybody new in, but we do want to take a moment to focus on some stuff that you've come to talk to us about, Brittany. First, introduce yourself again to everybody who doesn't know who you are.
Yeah. Well, my name is Brittany Cashman. I manage grants for the district. I'm also serving in a diverse role as Director of Teaching and Learning. I manage district assessments. I do some instructional coaching and support the admin team. I actually started my career at Randolph School District as an instructional aide. I became a teacher, then an administrator in a couple other districts, and I'm coming full circle, so I'm coming back here. The biggest grant that I manage is called the Mental Health Service Professional Demonstration Grant. Mm-hmm. We abbreviate that as MHSP. But
we love our abbreviations.
Yeah. It focuses on training school counselor interns so we get more support in our school. We know that Brian touched a little bit about our strategic planning, and for any school district, safety is paramount. And I think that you can't have a conversation about safety and your district goals without talking about mental health as well.
I will say I feel like anytime we hear about anything school safety related in the news, we always hear about the aftermath of, we hear about what was used to make the school unsafe, be it firearms or whatever, but nobody talks about what's being done necessarily to prevent that other than, well, we don't want firearms. Well, we know we don't want that, but there's more to it.
Yeah. And we're very fortunate to have this huge, rich stream of grant money. And I think that you hit the nail on the head. We want to be preventative, and we have now the funds and are gaining the tools and the resources and the personnel to do that. And when we have this conversation about mental health and what we can do with it, I think the people are the biggest asset that we have. And that's why what this grant does for us is we get to essentially double our school counselors. We have 2 school counselors in our district that are split K-12, but we also get to hire 2 interns in the last year of their program to help support those initiatives, which is really beneficial. Beyond those school counselors in front of kids, meeting with kids, we also, you hire me through the grant as well to manage not only this grant but grants for the district. I also help work and create those supportive systems, and I work with all staff in doing that. So it's like 75% of my salary is funded through the grant. 100% of our interns are funded and hired through the grant. We also have a business manager because we serve as the fiscal agent for the grant. 100% of her salary and benefits are covered. You mentioned Jessica Doherty, who presented in a great presentation on our Educators Rising Club at State Convention. She does amazing work. She teaches English and education courses to create that pipeline of future educators. We're talking like 55% of her salary is funded through the grant. She's also an advisor for that club. So we're talking about a lot of money. Every year, this grant funnels a little over $1 million into 6 districts, and we're one of them. And I would say Randolph's cut is probably about $400,000 that we receive. So again, when we're talking about creating these systems, we have a really solid chunk of money to do that. This grant funds supplies. So any supply that we can think of, a program that we need to support our initiatives, this grant funds. Things like furniture, technology, tons of professional development. And we know that giving people the means to learn and further themselves, whether it's an intern just starting their career or our current school counselors and school-based mental health professionals and even our teachers and other staff members, this grant allows us to do that. So again, just talking about the funding is really exciting and all the things that we get to do with it.
Now, I have to ask, because obviously, anytime we talk about school districts, there's always a conversation at some point in time about budgeting. And having a lot of this being covered by these grants, what kind of an impact does that have on a budget for a school district the size of Randolph?
It's enormous. I mean, you're looking at, like what you talked about, $400,000 when you're talking about a total of about an $8.5 million budget. You know, so that's a big chunk of what we do annually. So it not only helps us get creative with programming and it allows us to benefit more kids with more staff in the building that doesn't cost our taxpayers money.
That's awesome. And I'm looking back here, I see, as far as experience, spent some time in Mayville and Rio as well, also not massive school districts. So you have a lot of experience with districts this size.
Yeah, I have about 15 years in education. Like I said, I started as an instructional aide and became an administrator, and now in this really exciting, diverse role. I've dedicated my career to rural communities, and I think that's really special too, because when we're talking about resources and mental health and just educational programming in general, rural communities are very different. They have different personnel structures, they have different students, which I really enjoy. So I think that my experience lends well to writing and implementing grants and innovative systems specifically for rural communities.
Are there any specific challenges that rural communities might deal with that we wouldn't maybe think about, that bigger cities don't?
I would say too, personnel is always a challenge. Actively recruiting, hiring, training the best that we can get, the highest quality staff. But going along with that, something people wouldn't think about is housing. In order to get those high quality staff members who have this great impact on our students, we need affordable housing for them, and that's something very real in this economy that some urban areas don't have to think about.
It's one of those areas where, especially with smaller school districts, having a good partnership with the city and the region in general is always a good thing, right?
And I, just to extend that a little further too, we're very fortunate with this grant money. The student to school counselor ratio in the state of Wisconsin is about 1 to 400. What the school counselor professional organization recommends is a ratio of 1 to 250. So we are very fortunate to have a ratio with our interns in Randolph about 1 to 125. So that's a pretty low ratio considering where Wisconsin is with their ratios, with where the recommendations are. But another challenge is I don't think those recommendations take into consideration we don't have a full-time school social worker or any school social worker. We don't have school psychs. So some of those other areas too, when we're talking about resources, we just don't have the diverse personnel like an urban district would have at the frequency that an urban district would have.
Right. I think about even going back to when I was in high school, I kind of remember who my counselor was, but it was one of these things where I saw him once, maybe twice a year, long enough to say, so these are the classes you're taking. Do you feel like you're on the right path? Do you need any help? And that was about it. So this allows a lot more individualized, personalized availability.
And that's the one thing I love, and that's why I've dedicated my career to rural education, is because we can make those deep relationships. You know everyone in the school and their families and the connections so quickly, and that's one thing I think that Randolph is really great at, is building those individual connections, because when we talk about mental health and safety and the sense of belonging that kids need to develop to feel good in their school, to feel good in their communities, we are able to achieve that pretty quickly with our ratios.
I know when we think of a sense of belonging when it comes to kids, obviously they have their time together in the classroom, and that's always a good thing. But a lot of that bonding can happen outside of the classroom, can happen after school with programs like that. And I see a note here about a CCLC grant. What is that about?
Yeah, so that's another way we can diversify funding and create streams of income, essentially, that work together. So we receive the CCLC grant. It's an after-school program grant. We receive $100,000 every year for 5 years, so about $500,000 over the course of 5 years. It is currently for students in grades kindergarten through 5th grade, and we provide enrichment activities in a safe and welcoming environment. We have an amazing staff. A lot of our staff are students in our Future Educators Club and who are wanting to be future educators, so that's cool. And then we have a couple really dedicated adult staff members who are there to build relationships and give kids a really good after school space. Our program really focuses on, again, that social emotional learning aspect. We're a low tech, no tech program, so we value student to student relationships, staff to student relationships. Our kids play board games. Arts and crafts are really popular. We try to bring in speakers and have enrichment activities. And it also helps our parents. Our parents are working late. They might be working multiple jobs. Childcare is expensive. So not only does it fulfill that need, but it also gives extension to learning and relationship building outside the school day.
I like that you calling out the no tech, low tech thing. As a parent, there's so many times I come home and I'm like, you're still sitting there on the tablet. You've been sitting there on the tablet all day. Like, put it down, go outside, do something else, touch grass, grab a board game. We love the board games.
Talk to somebody. Yeah.
Right, anything. And it can be very tough. But in that kind of an environment, they don't have access to all their technology from at home. So it's a nice way to kind of, I don't want to say force, but nudge them in the right direction to interact.
I've got a point here too, just to talk about, like, one of the points I have on my part, but it fits in so great with this mental health piece, is that in Randolph we have over 90% of our kids in a club or activity. And so when you have that kind of numbers or a connection to the different things that we offer and the kids that are so involved, that helps with mental health and connection to our school. And you're going to find less problems with kids trying to have a problem with school. They're connected to it. They want to be there. They want to be at that club. They want to be at that activity. And that just also supports what the mental health grant is doing. Some of the things that I've talked about with not only area leaders, but at the state level, anyone that will listen to me in the WASDA organization or even at the state level and legislatures, the program that we are highlighting, I would love to see at a more state level. You talk about surplus of money and how can the state help with mental health. We have a pretty good blueprint on how this is helping rural schools, and the majority of our schools in our state are rural schools. How can we benefit the state with the formula, kind of what we're doing here in Randolph?
Well, in that K-5 window, those are some very formative years as far as building social relationships and setting good habits. I know if my kids had done a little bit more after school then, they'd probably be a lot more interested in doing things after school now and continuing that social climb that I think kids need to be on.
And then on the other side of that, offering that CCLC grant, again, Ms. Fay, our elementary principal, has been instrumental, along with Mrs. Cashman, to make this happen, and the great staff that they've brought on with the kids really just gives another piece back to our community that you can have more learning and enrichment outside of the school day, and then also benefit those parents that gives them the tech off options where they're doing some different things.
Before we move on from what we've talked about with your segment here, I have a couple of additional questions I'd like to ask if you're okay. If you had kind of a future wish list for what you'd like to see additionally added to help improve mental health and the children's reception of everything there at the school, is there anything that you'd love to see on that wish list?
I think we are in a really good spot, and like Brian said, we have a framework. We would like to make that framework sustainable. We have amazing grant money, but that grant money will run out. So that would be on my wish list, is after these 5-year grants to either be able to renew them, or it would be really great if at the state level we had money so that we could use it to continue to meet these needs. Because we do have a formula, we evaluate it, we have a framework. It's a whole process, and I would just like that to be sustainable moving forward. And I think we need money to do that.
When we think about the 5-year grant, and obviously you're talking about wanting the state to really invest in this as a wider program, are you guys tracking any variables to kind of see the success of the program so that you can present that forward?
We do. So we have to track how many interns successfully complete licensure and complete their internship hours. We have a 100% success rate right now. We track intern attitudes about the program. How do they feel? What's their experience like? And it's really great because we use it to make our program better. We're in year 2 right now, and we learned so much from last time when I was here. We also, so we track how many people we're sending out into the school counselor pipeline. How many people are we creating a really good experience for. We also track the impact on student learning and student performance. We track how many kids need moderate to intensive mental health and social emotional learning services. So we tier our students into 3 tiers in the education system, and our goal is to get less of those students needing intensive supports. The goal is preventative, like we talked about before, providing really well-rounded universal instruction and social emotional learning structures in place so that they do not need intensive services later on.
Now, I know when I was a kid, early elementary, I had a kind of after-school play thing that I would go to as well. Same thing, board games, a little bit of art. There's also a nice little space to do homework if need be. And I know the teachers give a lot of positive feedback on stuff like that. Are you guys seeing the same kind of feedback from the teachers now?
Yeah, I mean, from our after-school programming, kids love to be there. And that was a worry for me. I have 2 young kids. It's hard to keep kids engaged sometimes, but we have no issues with keeping kids engaged or building relationships. It's just, we're social beings. That's what they like, so if you expose them to that. And the same thing with our older kids that work in the program. They love it. It's such a symbiotic relationship that so many people are getting a lot out of it relationship-wise. So definitely, and a great thing too is I talked a little bit about our mental health goals, but our CCLC goals are very similar to our mental health goals in that we just want kids to feel supportive, and less of them will get to needing intensive services.
I think it's really important to watch the high school kids, interact with the elementary level kids. And so, I mean, one of the greatest things that we have in Randolph is the K-12 building, or the pre-K through 12 building. We're all on one roof, so we can access these different age levels by just walking down a different hallway, and we can use those senior kids that maybe have a study hall or looking to go into education as tutors or helpers in different ways. And so not only do they see them on the field or the hallway or in school, but now they're seeing them as their peer or their coach or their helper. And so it just is generating a better bond but with our kids, and then it's also giving that responsibility and that joy that we all have in teaching and learning to these seniors and older kids. So it's really, it's a awesome program. It's great to see it evolve as we keep growing with it. You don't know where you're going to go on that journey, and you're excited to get it, and you have this excitement, but as it rolls out, you still have to do the work to get it done. And Brittany and her team have been just awesome, and how it's gone has been truly amazing.
Well, I will say I got to praise the fact that you guys use those student interns. I know, little kids, as much as we think we're cool, they don't look up to us nearly as much as they look up to those seniors, or those higher grade students. So it is really nice that you guys are bringing them in and making them a part of that. So it's a nice little symbiotic benefit for both of them. Before we move on to some of the stuff that Mr. Zacco wanted to talk about, I want to take a moment to give you any final words you want to say for anybody who maybe wants to put the pshaw on mental health in school. I know it's not necessarily fashionable sometimes to talk about.
Yeah, it's difficult to talk about. It's uncomfortable. And I think one thing that I learned from students is we have to do things that are uncomfortable. We ask students to learn and grow every day, and so we need to do the same as adults, and we just need to be that listening ear. I would also say too, again, going back to safety. We look at safety and academic success, and kids need to feel safe and as they belong in your building, like they belong in your building. in order to create that safe environment, which is paramount. And in order to get the academic success that we're looking for and prepare kids to be productive members of society, we need to focus on their well-being, because they're going to grow up and they're going to be adults, so these problems don't go away. We need to teach students how to cope. So that's kind of what I would say. For a safer, more productive community, this is the cornerstone for that.
Absolutely. Kids seem to be growing up faster and faster, so it's good that we can focus on that earlier and earlier. That's really good. And of course, we're not going to kick you off the show and tell you to leave. We're going to keep you on here because you know, you might have something to chime in on all the rest of the stuff we want to talk about, because we do have a good list of things. Some of them fairly important that we wanted to get to. Before we jump into them, I do want to remind everybody, because we have to do this at the bottom of the hour, this is a paid program, and the advice and opinions expressed during the program are solely that of the Randolph School District, not necessarily WBEV or Good Karma Brands. One of the first things we wanted to talk about that I see you have on your list is kind of a big one, and we keep getting stories about this coming up in the news periodically, where school districts are doing their budgeting and they're looking at what they have to work with and realizing that they might have to look at a referendum. And it sounds like Randolph is going that way.
Yeah.
What do you got for me?
So 1994 was the creation of how schools get funded. And as we've gone, working on some slides and information for our webpage and for information to get out to communities, but more and more schools are decreasing in enrollment. I think about 75% of schools are declining in enrollment. And so and our costs, just like you have in your own household, are continuing to stay the same, or if not get higher. And so when you lose the amount of revenue that you get because you're losing kids in that formula, it just creates a burden not only for Randolph, but all school districts that are losing in kids. And so in last November in 2024, the Wisconsinites set a record for referendums in the state. And you're going to see that continue as more and more school districts are going to need resources just to maintain their operations. So we started out this path late last year, and not knowing exactly how fast we would need those funds to keep operating our schools. So we contacted School Perceptions, a survey company that is not part of the school. We hired them to contract a survey with our community, and had unbelievable response from our community. You know, they're hoping for 15% feedback. Sometimes they say they get 20. We had over 30% feedback from our community with that survey, so they were really excited about the numbers. In that number, we were asking if the community would support $1.45 million each year for 3 years. And in that number, we had not only our current expenses that we're looking ahead with the Baird model, how much we predict property values will go up, how much certain utility bills will go up. And so we're trying to map out with that spreadsheet or that powerful tool where we're going to be. And we built in some things like HVAC replacement and maybe a bus replacement in that number. And then we put that out to survey to our community. And with that great response, we found out they didn't like that number. It was pretty high. And so we had to meet as a board. We had to meet as our financial committees. Diane Pertzborn, who works with us as our business manager, sat down and really kind of crunched the numbers and figured out, well, we're going to have to go for something, because if we don't try in April in Wisconsin, we can only run on elections. And so there's no November election next year. So we would be without a chance to run for a referendum again until the following April, thus kind of put us into overdrive on what we can and can't do. So we did cut money out of the referendum ask, knowing that it wasn't supported with the survey information that we got. So we moved to a 1.2 for 3 years, which is non-recurring, and we're looking, and that will be on the April election. So
that'll be something for people to look for. That's straightforward. It's just something that people are going to have to see. They're going to have to make a decision on there if they choose to go vote in April.
Correct.
And initially you had said 1.45 for 4.
Or for 3 years.
Or for 3,
still
sorry.
For 3, yep.
And so now you're looking at 1.2 for 3. The non-recurring is always kind of an important thing to mention, because sometimes people think, well, you're just going to do this again, and you're just going to keep doing it, and it's going to be nonstop, and you'll just keep rolling. You know,
yes.
It's not to say that in the future this may not be something that's needed, because operating expenses could change, but this is kind of your sighted look out with the budget.
As sadly to say, but no, this is something that will be part of our DNA and our culture moving forward. We, like I said, we're one of the first or one of the last ones to do this. All our neighboring school districts have already done this. We are one of 40 of the 421 school districts in the state that haven't done this yet. And so we have been fiscally responsible. We need to do a little better job. And so inside the ask that we're asking for, we are going to have to make cuts to our budget the way we're operating right now. So that will happen. But we do need these additional funds to stay open. You know what I mean? We do have a nice fund balance. We have done a nice job. Our previous business managers, another one and superintendents have done a nice job in building a fund balance that we can use so we can sustain a little bit of this. But long term, it is not the answer. So we will probably be in that cycle unless they change the funding at the state level. I think all the school districts in Wisconsin are trending this way.
Now, I'm going to play a little bit of the horrible devil's advocate here and say, what do you tell people who go, we'll just budget better? All you have to do is budget better. If we've got to make do and we can't just ask for more, you know.
Now, I'll give you an example.
Please do.
So declining enrollment, it's affected our revenue. So like in 2021, our revenue limit, so the revenue limit is the money that we get from taxes and from the state aid, was $5,450,000. And then this year, so in 2024-25,
right,
the revenue limit is $5,398,000. So in 3 years, you're seeing a decrease in the amount of money that we get to have.
Right.
And then you also know that utilities, food, everything to operate your own home has done what in the last 3 years?
It's all gone up.
All gone up. So you're looking at increases in insurance and liability is somewhere between 15 and 17%. You're looking at salary and staff increases somewhere between 8 to 10%, and you're looking at health coverage is going up 11%. So, and you're getting less money to make that happen. So what a referendum does is it asks our taxpayers to go over the revenue limit, and that's essentially what the state is asking us to do, so that we can operate where we need to be.
I know it's really easy for a community to say things like, well, I don't have a kid in school, or my kid's almost done, so I don't know why I got to deal with this because they've only got a year left or whatever. What do you say to those people?
Well, the fantastic thing about Randolph is it's a great place to live, right? So people have moved in, they've raised their family, their kids have maybe gone to school there, and it's such a great community, they don't leave. So there's not a ton of new building, and so really, once a house comes for sale in Randolph, it's sold. I mean, people want to live there and want to stay there, but that doesn't necessarily happen to have big, large families that are moving in that increase our enrollment, right? Again, the number of kids in your school is what the main reason is for that state aid and for that formula to work. What would I say is, if let's say in a grand scheme of things, let's say, school would, worst case scenario, we don't have Randolph School District anymore, or no school in the state has dissolved, but if they would, you're going to pay school taxes somewhere because you're going to become part of one district or another at some point. Right. So it's not like your school district tax is ever going to just vanish. So, and so what we're trying to do is be fiscally responsible, tell you what we need that we basically need to operate, and also understand that people have to tighten their belt a little. We will make sure we're tightening ours as well. Thus, the number that we're bringing is less than what would be asked for to operate as we are right now. So, I guess, as you think about it, fewer births, fewer kids, more alternative schools have popped up since the pandemic. So you have more kids looking at different alternatives other than the traditional school. Mm-hmm. But essentially, fewer kids mean fewer dollars.
That makes a lot of sense. And I do see a note here on the stuff that you've given us saying a portion of that $1.2 million could be paid out by state school aid. So taxpayers are not necessarily taking that entire burden on themselves.
Correct. It's when we ask for that some of that money is going to be aided, so it won't be that total number on top of just the taxpayers paying that amount. And then also, we are predicting still a slight decline in kids. So as we drop and that money's that's the need for the money, it won't actually be a 1.2 the taxpayers' total burden. So
now, this is something that I hear a lot when it talks to these operating referendums. If you're asking for 1.2, does it mean you have to get and have to use 1.2, or might it be that year two you don't need as much?
Sure, yeah. So actually, if you get the money in these referendums, and I know school districts like Portage have done the same thing, they basically say we will only use what we need to use, and at the end they can give that back to the taxpayers. So that can happen with operation referendums. In our case, we don't foresee that we're still going to be a deficit after these 3 years is our projection. Of course, those projections 3-4 years out are a little different. You're again trying to see the future 3 years down the road. I wish we all could do that, but I don't see that we will be able to do that. We're still going to make cuts in that 3-year span to make the budgets work.
Now, I'm going to ask you here, because obviously you guys have had some time to look over budgeting stuff. What are some hard numbers? What do people need to understand about how much it costs to run a district, to have, it's obviously not inexpensive.
Yeah, well, your largest piece is your staffing and your healthcare and those benefit packages you offer. But when you're looking at it, what we're proud of in the last few years is that our academic achievement is continuing to grow. We have the high rate of kids involved in activities and the things that we do offer. And so trying to keep those together, and we do have smaller class sizes. So these have been kind of paramount to Randolph for years. And so those are the things that we wanted to know what is most important. And we've asked some of those things in the survey to get more feedback. And if we do have to make cuts, where would you want us to see those cuts being made? But sometimes you get questions like, well, we need to cut more athletics or activities. Again, that's the part that we talked in mental health. We want those kids to be connected to those things. But let's say we did cut all our sports, all our activities, all those things. You're looking at about $300,000 that are budgeted out of a $9 million budget. Really is not going to help us cut. Even we cut everything, and then you're going to have to find kids that are going to probably go, well, if you don't have football or you don't have forensics, I want to go to this school next year that does. So you're going to be in a bigger deficit if you do those things. So hard numbers. I mean, yes, it's staffing. It's those utilities and things like that. And if you lose kids like we are, it's not like you're losing 10 in one grade. So we're sporadically losing kids throughout the whole. So you can't just drop a teacher or a section that easily, because it's not all in one area, if that makes sense. Obviously, through attrition or through retirements, or we can find a way to consolidate some pieces, we will do that. But really, yes, staffing is a big part. Our benefit package has been great. But utilities, food costs, all those things are continuing to rise, just like anyone else is seeing elsewhere.
And we've talked about how you were saying about 90% of the students are involved in extracurricular activities. So that's 90% of the students who are going to be negatively impacted for what will amount to be a very small amount of savings.
And yes, so I know that was highlighted in parts of our survey, but really in my mind, keeping our programs and activities for our kids that are important. That's the thing that's going to make Randolph what Randolph is. So.
Now, we may be touching on this a little bit later, so I apologize if I'm jumping the gun here a little bit, but you talk about, kids leaving the district. We're hearing a lot lately about vouchers that allow kids to kind of go to what school they want to go to and really pick and choose. So obviously, I'm sure there are kids who may look at the higher academic, or parents looking at the higher academics coming out of Randolph, or what you guys do offer for extracurriculars and sports, and the smaller class sizes, and saying, well, I want to get my kids into there. So I imagine there's got to be some kids coming in as well, but it sounds like overall it's kind of a net negative for losing.
We are actually an open enrollment winner. So we get more kids in than we actually lose at Randolph. So we are an open enrollment winner. And so yes, we do have I believe 4 or 5 parochial schools in our area, and some that do accept vouchers, and some kids do take that. And I do think that we have worked well with those parochial schools as far as transportation of kids, working with program. If we have questions, I think we've built really nice professional relationships with each other, and I respect what they're doing, and I think they respect what we're doing. But yeah, so there is vouchers that are built into the formula that yes, that state dollars do go to the voucher program as well. But then again, that's a different system than open enrollment, but it adds to the complexity, I guess, if you will, when people are trying to understand all of school finance, all the pieces and components in it. Right. But yes, there is some voucher programs that take money away from the district as well, yes.
Yeah, it's a very complicated process. I'm glad you have to deal with it and I don't. It's way more complicated than what I do here. That being said, because it is such a complicated process, it is important to kind of inform the public of what's going on, because you don't want anybody to feel like, you guys just drop this on them and they have no clue.
Right.
It's part of the reason why you do the show that you do now. It's part of the reason why you'll be back later. We'll talk about this later. You'll be back on community comment. But you guys also have a public meeting scheduled. Is that correct?
We're going to be first thing I'm going to talk to staff here hopefully this week, if not early next week. Talk to staff about where we're at. That's the first point. Obviously, we've had the radio show today, but we will have staff informed on what we're doing and where we're at. And then from there, we're looking at somewhere at the end of February and then again in early March, having dates at our school where we can come in and have conversation with myself, maybe Mrs. Pritzborn will be there, our administrative team, and we'll be able to answer questions. We've got a website started already that we're continuing putting information up. We'll use our Facebook page. We're going to use some mailers as well to get information out to our community because not everyone is on our mailing list and not everyone is on a social media platform. So we'll get those mailers out and that's one of the things we found out in our survey too, is that our community would like to know what's going on via mail. So get something to them. So we will do that, and I'm compiling those things daily as we go here. As we get closer and closer to April, it seems like it's far away, but it's not in my mind. And so we've got a lot of work. I actually just did schedule with the village as well. I will be at their committee meetings. I believe it's February 27th, that Thursday. I'll be there answering any questions at the village level. So we'll be scheduling those, and I'll be putting them out as well. But yes, we will have 2 meetings, dates to be determined yet, at school, and then I'll be out and about at different townships as well as the village promoting what we're doing.
So we're going to let everybody know, pay attention obviously to the district website, look in your mail, keep your eyes out for things. I'm sure we'll have a story or two about it here on Daily Dodge once we hear about those dates being locked in so that we can help with that. How do you guys determine what the, I'm assuming it's basic math, but how do you guys determine what kind of a tax impact this is going to have? Because that's a question I'm sure you're going to get asked.
This is the big one, and so I don't want to go down the rabbit hole too far, but I'll try to make it as simple as possible. So for years, we've passed the capital referendum, so we built the new building that we're in, our great building, in 2017, and because of that, the community passed a referendum to build that building. We have that debt then. So we have that debt, and in state statute, you can basically, you could ask for it all as soon as you wanted it. Basically, if you could, it would be kind of political suicide, I guess you would, but people would be upset that you're raising their taxes. But they had a fairly high mill rate for a long time, and so what the district had done is kind of over levied what they actually needed and paid off the backside of that 2017 debt. And what does that do? There's a couple different things. It kind of keeps your mill rate. It was slowly declining, so there wasn't a bunch of jumps in your taxes. But at that point, they didn't need that money to operate the school, and you can't use that over levied money to operate your school district, if that makes sense.
Right.
So where we're at in this point in time is we're no longer going to be able to defease or over levy to pay back part of that building earlier. And so instead of doing that, we're asking for this operational referendum, so you'd see a fairly flat tax impact. There's going to be a levy impact, so there's going to be some increase to taxes. I can't guess on what the property tax or property values are going to be, which impacts your mill rate. But overall, you're going to see a slight raise in the levy, which would be similar to our tax levy of 2022. So we're going to try to stay in that same ballpark where we taxed the community in 2022. If this referendum passes, we would like to stay within that threshold so we wouldn't go over a pre-existing levy.
So
or
hypothetically,
pretty
there
close.
Shouldn't be any big surprises where you open up that tax bill and
it should be pretty set. And actually, we had defeased a little bit of debt last year. So actually, if the referendum passes, you'll see a slight decrease in your levy next year, and then a slight increase again in the following year, and another little increase again. So you'll see we're trying to keep the overall levy around 3.5 to 3.7 million. And so that's kind of our target as we go through the next couple of years. And so hopefully you would see a very minimal or in some cases next year, a tax relief in the levy.
Just glancing over some of the other information that you have here, talking about, and you got a nice little chart, which I love your charts, by the way.
Diane Pertzborn did the chart, so I cannot take full credit. She did that for us. So
Diane, when I see you at some point in time, we'll have to shake hands because I'm a big fan of charts. So you got a lot of information that you've laid out here. Obviously, a lot of this information is going to be made available at these informational meetings. And I guess I'm going to stress how important it is for people to actually show up to these things if you have questions.
Right.
I mean, the school district, it's a big part of the city. It's a big part of the community. It obviously serves a large part of the population. So definitely very, very important to be there and to take part in that. Any final words or anything you want to point out as far as information about this that maybe you feel we need to get out there now before that meeting?
I think one of the biggest things is looking at your tax bill, understanding that, where we're at. And one of the biggest things that we've seen in our area is that there's been reassessments in the last couple of years. And so properties and houses have been reassessed, and they're up almost to market value or at market value. And so you're going to see property values of 20% increase and 20% increase. Obviously, that affects then the mill rate that we do assess for our school. And so you see an increase in taxes. So I would say last year, the majority of people saw a tax decrease. This year, you did see a tax increase with our mill rate going from 836 to 847. But what I would say is look at that tax sheet. Make sure if you have any questions, please call us. We're going to be there to help, and then try to walk you through what we're seeing, and making sure that there's not something that you don't have on your tax bill that someone else does. But we really want to help just give the information to you, make sure you're making informed decisions, and obviously we want to do everything we can to help support our residents and obviously keep the best school that we can in Randolph.
I think it's important to point out, and I'm just going to throw this out there as kind of my 2 cents, but when you're looking at your overall tax impact, the school is a portion of it. There's a lot more that goes on to it. So even if what the school needs might cause a jump in that particular area, there might be other areas where tax cuts could come through that may make your tax bill look flat or smaller, depending on your situation. And of course, you mentioned homes being assessed. It sounds like a lot of rural communities are getting reassessed for the first time in many years.
Correct.
So a lot of people are getting kind of an eye-opener and awakening from that anyways.
And so, and basically, if you have questions, please reach out. But yes, that mill rate is in the 8s right now. 847, I believe, is our mill rate this year. And so it's dropped in the last 10 years. The last 2 years is the first time that's been under $10. So we are aware of it. We do want to not obviously tax our community out, but we definitely are trying to make the best product we can. And with the funding formula, we are going to need help.
All right. Now, something else that's coming up in April, we want to make sure we find time to talk about this with the last few minutes that we've got on the show. There is a school board race.
Yeah,
it's coming up in April.
Yep, we actually have 3 spots and 3 people. So we have Mike Beal as an incumbent. He'll be listed first on our ballot. Wayne Vanderplug is also an incumbent. He's our school board president at this point. He's up for re-election. And then John Stampley is up for the open seat. So we'll have 3 openings. So it looks, unless there's a major write-in campaign for someone else, those 3 gentlemen look to be part of the Randolph School Board coming up in April and May.
All right. You've had a chance to work with 2 of these incumbents and, up for re-election. Obviously, I don't want to pry you into giving any endorsements, but solid so far?
Yeah, the board has been great. Obviously, it's the first school board that I've been able to work with as a superintendent. So obviously, Mike and Wayne have been there since the start, and obviously I've known John from being in the community. And so, looking forward to working with them and looking forward to doing great things here in Randolph.
Awesome. Do want to remind everybody again, we will be seeing you here in the Daily Irish Television Studios 2 more times here before we get to April. You'll be coming on to Community Comment here with Kevin Haugen. I see the dates for that. We have February 18th marked down. By that point, I'm assuming we'll probably have dates kind of locked in for your public informational meetings. So we'll see you on for that. But then you're going to be back here for the Rocket Blast again in March. Yep.
That looks like about the week before the election. If anyone has questions, even during this duration, if anyone has questions, please reach out, email me. I can even, when you ask questions, and obviously one person has a question, more people might be thinking that, so that might be things that we want to bring up in the show and just work through. And some of those things will hopefully take care of themselves, and we'll be able to get the best information out to everyone.
If anybody does want to send some questions your way now, what's the best way to get a hold of you?
Email is great. It's zaccob@rsdwi.org. You can find that on our webpage as well. Phone call as well, 920-326-2427. My extension is 1105, and the great thing about our phone system, if you leave me a voice message, it will ding my email, so I can access that. So you got access to me, basically, if you leave me a voicemail or an email almost all the time with the phones we have today. So
awesome. And last but not least, I see a quick note on here about open enrollment window opening up here starting February 3rd. You want to take a quick minute to
Yeah, obviously we obviously love more kids to come to our district and see the wonderful things that we can offer. Just like all our schools, the open enrollment window opens February 3rd and ends April 30th. So if you're interested, please again call those numbers, use that email, get a hold of us, and stop in and talk to us about it.
Awesome. Well, Brian, Brittany, I want to thank you guys for taking the time to come on the show today. Went over a lot of stuff and a lot of really good information. Hopefully people are going to watch back on this and kind of soak a lot of this in before those public information meetings come up or before they start asking about whether or not mental health is important in our schools, because it sounds like you guys are doing a lot of important work over there.
You're going to be a star. You're going to be all over our website, Facebook page. It's going to be great.
Well, I think you guys will be the stars, that's for sure. I do want to remind everybody this has been a paid program. The advice and opinions expressed during the program are solely that of Randolph School District, not necessarily WBEV or Good Karma Brands.